Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about session 28. And 28 here is pretty heady and metaphysical, so I'm going to do my absolute best to comment on the things that Ra and Dawn are talking about, as always. But I am a little nervous, so bear with me. But let's go ahead and get started. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. I may be backtracking a little bit and make a few false starts today because I think we are at possibly the most important part of what we are doing in trying to make it apparent through questioning how everything is one, how it comes from one intelligent infinity. This is difficult for me to do, so please bear with my errors in questioning. The concept that I have right now of the process, using both what you have told me and some of Dewey Larson's material having to do with the physics of the process, I have the concept that intelligent infinity expands outward from all locations everywhere. It expands outward in every direction uniformly like the surface of a balloon or a bubble expanding outward from every point everywhere. It expands outward at what's called unit velocity or the velocity of light. This is Larson's idea of the progression of what he calls space-time. Is this concept correct? I am Ra. This concept is incorrect, as is any concept of the one intelligent infinity. This concept is correct in the context of one particular logos, or love, or focus of this creator, which has chosen its, shall we say, natural laws and ways of expressing them mathematically and otherwise. The one undifferentiated intelligent infinity, unpolarized, full and whole, is the macrocosm of the mystery-clad being. We are messengers of the law of one. Unity, at this approximation of understanding, cannot be specified by any physics, but only be activated or potentiated intelligent infinity due to the catalyst of free will. This may be difficult to accept. However, the understandings we have to share begin and end in mystery. So here, Dawn is trying to conceptualize what we have discerned as the expansion of our universe, as a reflection of the nature of intelligent infinity. And here Ra is saying that this is the nature of the expression of intelligent infinity that your individuated logos has chosen. That free will allows different expressions of how physical reality operates. That the physics of our universe aren't necessarily the physics of every universe. And Ra does say this may be difficult to accept. And, I just remember going to school as a child and always being told that physics are these laws that are unbreakable, that exist throughout the entirety of our potential universe, of the entire creation. And that honestly never sat right with me. Even as a child, it just didn't make sense how we could possibly know that. It seemed like a huge assumption, a huge leap to make, just based on what we could observe relatively locally, right? And I just want to clarify, I am not like a science denier. I would say I am some level of science skeptic, but I believe in science. I believe we can measure things, and I believe that the general consensus of how things work is relatively well thought out, and that we do have like natural laws, like Ra talks about. But here Ra is saying that each logos has its own natural laws. So the way that we see the expansion of our universe and how it's expanding at light speed, essentially, that's just something that our logos has chosen to express, and that other logoi may have different modes of expressing itself in its physical reality. So basically here, Ra's saying that that isn't the nature of intelligent infinity, okay? That's just one expression of intelligent infinity, because intelligent infinity is infinite. There's all sorts of potentials of how reality can be expressed, because it's infinite, and we're just playing. We're just figuring out different ways to do that, and this is our local way. And again, the understandings they have to share begin and end in mystery. So a lot of Again, this whole session is going to be about the mysterious, about these things that cannot be measured. And so in 28.2, Don says, well, we had yesterday arrived at a point where we were considering colors of light. You said that the nature of vibratory patterns of your universe is dependent upon the configurations placed on the original material or light by the focus of love using its intelligent energy to create a certain pattern of illusions or densities. Then, after this material, you said that there's further information which you'd be happy to share, but we ran out of time. Could you complete the further information on that? I am Ra. In discussing this information, we then, shall we say, snap back into the particular methods of understanding or seeing that which is the one sound vibration complex Dewey offers. This being correct for the second meaning of intelligent infinity, the potential which then, through catalyst, forms the kinetic. This information is a natural progression of inspection of the kinetic shape of your environment. You may understand each color or ray as being, as we had said, a very specific and accurate apportion of intelligent energy's representation of intelligent infinity, each ray having been previously inspected in other regards. This information may be of aid here. We speak now non-specifically to increase the depth of your conceptualization of the nature of what is. The universe in which you live is recapitulation in each part of intelligent infinity. Thus you will see the same patterns repeated in physical and metaphysical areas. The rays or portions of light being, as you surmise, those areas of what you may call the physical illusion which rotate, vibrate, or are of a nature that may be, shall we say, counted or categorized in rotation manner in space-time as described by the one known as Dewey. Some substances having various of the rays in physical manifestation visible to the eye. This being apparent in the nature of your crystallized minerals, which you count as precious, the ruby being red, and so forth. Questioner. This light that occurred as a consequence of vibration, which is a consequence of love. I'm going to ask if that statement is right. Is that correct? I am Ra. This statement is correct. Questioner. Okay. This light then can condense into material as we know it in our density into all of our chemical elements because of rotations of the vibration at quantized intervals or units of angular velocity. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is quite correct. So I read on because Dawn has a better conceptualization of what Ra is explaining here than I do innately. But essentially here, that is what Ra is saying, is that light forms your reality in intelligent ways, let's say. Intelligent design is a phrase that, is very Christian loaded, but our universe is very intelligently designed. Our galaxy, our Logos has chosen a lot of the ways that physical reality forms for a purpose. And some of those choices have been discoveries. A lot of those choices have been studied, and experiments have been ran to examine the viability of these choices of how to form reality. And so essentially Ra says that they consider the photon to be essentially the smallest form of physical matter that we understand. So each photon essentially vibrates and rotates at various levels, and these vibrational frequencies are what create the elements that create our physical reality. So part of that manifestation is color, and that color is a representation of a certain portion of intelligent infinity. And Ra uses the idea of crystallized minerals and how they hold a color vibration, and how those color vibrations are, again, a representation of the manifestation of a certain portion of intelligent infinity. And I'm so much more into the philosophical questions and explorations that occur during this conversation with Ra and Dawn, but I also understand that the metaphysical discussions are symbolic of the philosophical nature of our reality, but it's hard to find philosophical things to comment on in this discussion of the physical manifestation of our reality. So I'm feeling just a hair tripped up because I feel like I want to comment something philosophical on this and I don't really know what to say. So we're just going to keep going and we're going to take each question as it is and again do our best to expand upon it. So we have 28.5. Dawn says, thank you. I am wondering, what is the catalyst or the activator of the rotation? What causes the rotation so that the light condenses into our physical or chemical elements? I am Ra. It is necessary to consider the enabling function of the focus known as love. This energy is of an ordering nature. It orders in a cumulative way from greater to lesser so that when its universe, as you may call it, is complete, the manner of development of each detail is inherent in the living light and thus will develop in such and such way. Your own universe having been well studied in an empirical fashion by those you call your scientists, and having been understood or visualized, shall we say, with greater accuracy by the understandings or visualizations of the one known as Dewey. So again, Dewey Larson has studied and theorized about the nature of reality and about these vibrational frequencies being what actually creates our physical reality. And so that's where Dawn got this idea and started questioning about it, and Ra has said, yes, Dewey has a advanced understanding beyond what our scientists already do understand, which is pretty good. Here Ra is giving props to our scientists for having studied the nature of our reality and coming to some pretty solid conclusions. But again, it's just our version of reality. It's just this local physical manifestation. But here then Ra is saying that love, what they call love, is the activator of these vibrational rotations. So understanding the pure energy of love, trying to undistort how we use love, how we push love out from us in a way that desires to alter our physical reality, is a really important part of this whole expansion of our consciousness. And again, love is what expands our consciousness, a love of learning, a love of seeking the Creator. And it's this, again, this pure form of love. And I think, if you can meditate on it and think about it, you can find it and you can begin to recognize it more and more, what that actually means and how that love, again, pushes outward from yourself via your will. You use your will to push that love outward. And the less that love is distorted, the more that love can manifest in the ways that you anticipate for it to manifest. As long as you also understand, on some intuitive level, the love of the Logos that has actually created this whole reality for us to engage with. And, I'm going to talk about it here too. At the very beginning, where I was talking about the one intelligent infinity. It's full, and it's just, it's hard to describe what the one intelligent infinity is because it's all one thing until we differentiate it via love into intelligent energy. And, I'm not a huge fan of what the entity who channels the entity known as Bashar has become in modern times. I think he has focused too much on making money from his teachings, and I think that distortion really bothers me in a lot of ways, regardless of who it is, because I feel like if you have information that you think will help raise the vibrations of the collective, if you objectively think that, then you shouldn't charge for it. That's my belief. That's why I will never ever charge for anything. I will never have paywalled courses or anything like that because it just doesn't make sense to me why you would put something like that behind a paywall if you really genuinely think that it will help humanity and help somebody. Again, like Ra was saying just a few sessions ago, just helping one person is worth all the effort. So if there's one person who can't afford to pay, like Bashar charges $40-$50 for every channeling session that he does. He has a video, it's like an hour-long video, and they cost that much money to download 1 hour-long video. And a lot of people cannot afford that. Like, I wouldn't be able to afford that. Like, that's a huge expense. And again, too, when we have like LL Research has thousands of channelings on their website that are all available for free, the idea of spending $40 for an hour-long channeling just blows my mind. But anyway, I'm just saying that as the caveat to what I'm about ready to say, which is when I first started reading a lot of channeling, I was reading a lot of Bashar because there were websites that had a lot of old Bashar transcripts from like the 80s. And a lot of those were really great, honestly. A lot of them were really, really good and helpful. But I would say approximately 10 years ago or so is when Daryl decided to start paywalling everything. And he sent lots of cease and desist letters to people who had these websites with his old transcripts, and then they just went away. So I don't know if there's even anywhere you can access these old transcripts. I would assume he's got somewhere on his website that you can pay to access these old transcripts, but I don't know that. And I'm not sure, honestly. But something from those old transcripts that was really very helpful for me in conceptualizing intelligent infinity, the one infinite creator, was a meditation that he offered, which was to imagine that the creator is essentially just one, let's say, photon. The creator is just one photon, but that single photon can move infinitely fast. And so essentially you have one particle of creation that is drawing everything all at once, all the time, but it's just the one photon. And whether or not that's true, I can't say, obviously, but I do think that there's a lot to be pondered about that idea of there just being one particle that moves at infinite speeds, and that is what creates all of our reality. So, 28.6, Don asks, when does individualization, or the individualized portion of consciousness, come into play? How does this individualization occur, and at what point does individualized consciousness take over in working on the basic light? I am Ra. You remain carefully in the area of creation itself. In this process, we must further confuse you by stating that the process by which free will acts upon potential intelligent infinity to become focused intelligent energy takes place without the space-time of which you are so aware as it is your continuum experience. The experience or existence of space-time comes into being after the individuation process of logos or love has been completed and the physical universe, as you would call it, has coalesced or begun to draw inward while moving outward to the extent that that which you call your sun bodies have in their turn created timeless chaos coalescing into what you call planets. These vortices of intelligent energy spending a large amount of what you would call first density in a timeless state, the space-time realization being one of the learned teachings of this density of beingness. Thus we have difficulty answering your questions with regard to time and space and their relationship to the, what you would call, original creation, which is not a part of space-time as you can understand it. So, space and time are illusions as we see them, as we experience them, but it's a part of the creation that allows us to have experience. But first density doesn't have space-time. So the beginning of creation, what we think of as the quote-unquote beginning of creation, doesn't have this awareness of space-time. There are portions of our galaxy that aren't at all involved in space-time. And Ra even says that there's a first density planet in our solar system that just doesn't experience space-time at the moment. This progression of time on a scale that can be measured. And that's something that is learned in first density when the elements are interacting with each other, this concept of space-time. So Don's question is, at what point in time in the creation and expansion of the galaxy, of the logos, of our local individualized portion of creation, does that creation then become even more individualized? And Ross says we can't really answer that question because the concept of time doesn't work like that. So 28.7, Don says, thank you. Does a unit of consciousness, an individualized unit of consciousness, create, say, a unit of creation? I will give an example. Would one individualized consciousness create one galaxy of stars, the type that has many millions of stars in it? Does this happen? I am Ra. This can happen. The possibilities are infinite. Thus, a logos may create what you call a star system, or it may be the logos creating billions of star systems. This is the cause of the confusion in the term galaxy, for there are many different logos entities or creations, and we would call each, using your sound vibration complex, a galaxy. So here I was saying that they equate the word galaxy with logos, and some galaxies have billions of stars. Some galaxies may only have one star, because a logos may only be one star. Now, our galaxy has billions of stars, and each of the stars then is a sub-logos. So it is another individualized portion of that greater logos. And that's what Don is really trying to talk about here, is like, what portions are individualized? When does that separation from intelligent infinity begin? And our galaxy is an individualized portion of the intelligent infinity, but then our star is an individualized portion of that individualized portion. So essentially it's, like Russian nesting dolls. Like we're not the littlest, obviously. I guess we can start at the smallest that we perceive would be the single-celled organisms that exist on our body. We are their logos. So we've got so I believe it would be, we have the sub-logoi that exist on our body, essentially. And then we are sub-logoi of our sun. Our sun is a sub-logoi of the Milky Way galaxy. And then the Milky Way galaxy is a logos of itself. But again, Ross saying here that there are some logos who only choose one star system to operate from, to explore itself as an individualized portion of intelligent infinity. So again, there are just an infinite number of ways for intelligent infinity to individualize and choose to experience itself. And again, for Ra, a galaxy is one individualized portion of that intelligent infinity. So 28.8, Don says, let's take as an example the planet that we are on now, and tell me how much of the creation was created by the same logos that created this planet. I am Ra. This planetary logos is a strong logos, creating approximately 250 billion of your star systems for its creation. The, shall we say, laws or physical ways of this creation will remain, therefore, constant. So here Ra is saying that, yes, the physical laws exist, that we recognize, exist in all of the Milky Way galaxy, but just in this little bubble, because this is just one logos that has chosen these physical laws to express itself and to create catalyst for the creator to experience itself. So then 28.9, Don says, then what you're saying is that the lenticular star system, which we call a galaxy, that we find ourselves in, with approximately 250 billion other suns like our own, was created by a single logos. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. So just a tiny little thought here, because it's something that I've been thinking about lately. As Ra says, we have 250 billion star systems, okay? And then Don says, okay, so we have 250 billion suns in our galaxy. And Ra doesn't quibble about this. But, the upper limit of what we've estimated in the Milky Way galaxy is 400 billion stars. And a lot of our star systems in our galaxy are binary star systems. So I've just been wondering a lot about how that changes the nature of reality of the third density experience in a star system that is a binary star system. When there are two stars, are they both individualized sublogos? Are they competing in some way for expression of their will, of their desire for how reality should be created? So I wonder, when Ross says 250 billion star systems, if they are really, again, some of those star systems that they're referring to are binary star systems, and that we have more than 250 billion actual stars in our galaxy. I don't know. Just something that I've been thinking about, throwing it out there since this is the conversation that's happening. I actually have a document, off on a little tangent. I have a document where I collect potential questions for Ra if there is another Ra contact in the future. Now, I don't actually think that there will be another Ra contact in the future. I just really don't think that's probably going to happen. But if it does, I would really like to at least have some well thought out questions available to maybe potentially offer to the group who is doing this potential future Ra contact that I don't actually think is going to happen. I just see so many people who are trying to contact Ra, and again, a lot of those people are very new to studying Ra, and so the questions are very superficial and repetitive of what is already in these books. So just using my specific brain to be like, oh, okay, well, these are questions that actually haven't been answered, that could be interesting to hear about, that could be interesting to learn about. If I was in a position where I was questioning a Ra contact, which again, I don't think that I will be, but I would just probably go full in on the archetypal mind. But there are some other nuts and bolts questions about reality that might even go a little bit more on the transient side, but I think are just important to us and are gaps in what Dawn chose to question about. Anyway, I think in the future, when that document is a little bit more robust, that might be an episode all on its own, where I talk about these questions that Ra didn't answer that I think would be really interesting to have answers for. Just as another example, one of the other questions I have is, what happens to the second density beings that are harvested at the end of our third density cycle? Right? So like the question is really like, what happens to our pets? I think a lot of people want to think, oh, maybe our pets will incarnate as a human and I'll get to have them as a child or something like that. And some people believe that, but I don't think that actually happens because they have to start a third density cycle at the beginning. So are they going to another planet? Are they going to go to the same planet that we're going to go to, those of us who are unharvested from this third density? Just what happens to those second density beings who get harvested at the end of the cycle? I think that is a interesting question that a lot of people would like to know the answer to. And as somebody who loves my animal companions that I exist with, I would like to know the answer to that question too. But anyway, so one of the questions then, is about how a binary star system differs from our singular star system in its manifestation of densities as a sublogos. And what is it like to, what differences are there in a dual sublogos? How does that work? And anyway, sorry for that little tangent. We're going to go back to session 28 now. And 28.10, Dawn says, now, since there are many individualized portions of consciousness in this lenticular galaxy, did this logos then subdivide into more individualization of consciousness to create these consciousness or divide into these consciousness? I am Ra. You are perceptive. This is also correct, although an apparent paradox. Questioner, could you tell me what you mean by an apparent paradox? I am Ra. It would seem that if one logos creates the intelligent energy waves for a large system, there would not be the necessity or possibility of the further sublogos differentiation. However, within limits, this is precisely the case, and it is perceptive that this has been seen. So again, here we're just talking about how we've got the main logos, the Milky Way galaxy, and then there are sublogos and sub-sublogos, and there's still individualized portions of intelligent infinity that come from this other much larger individualized portion of intelligent infinity. And that Ross sees that as an apparent paradox, that the individual can be split in this many infinite ways. But although it may not be infinite, because Ra does say that there are limits to this splitting and individualization and differentiation. So 2812, Dawn says, "Thank you. Could you please make the instrument cough?" And Ra makes the instrument cough. Carla is apparently still sick. And there is another point where Dawn asks Ra to cough, and I'm just going to skip that when we get to that. So I'm just going to keep going. 2813, Dawn says, "Thank you. Do all of the individualized portions of the Logos then in our, I'll call the lenticular galaxy that we are in, 250 billion suns or stars. I will call that the major galaxy, just so we will not get mixed up in our terms. Does all the consciousness then, in this individualized form that goes into what we are calling the major galaxy, start out and go through all of the densities in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or then to 8th, or is there, shall I say, some who start higher up in the rank and go in a, so that there is always a mixture of intelligent consciousness in the galaxy?" I am Ra. The latter is more nearly correct. In each beginning, there is the beginning from infinite strength. Free will acts as a catalyst. Beings begin to form the universes. Consciousness then begins to have the potential to experience. The potentials of experience are created as a part of intelligent energy and are fixed before experience begins. However, there is always, due to free will acting infinitely upon the creation, a great variation in initial responses to intelligent energy's potential. Thus, almost immediately, the foundations of the, shall we call it, hierarchical nature of beings begins to manifest as some portions of consciousness or awareness learn through experience in a much more efficient manner. So here Dawn is asking, again, I believe we already talked about this at some point. Does all of creation begin in first density and move its way through each density? And Ra says, not really, because when everything is created, there are certain portions of intelligent energy that manifest as the later portions of the densities. That there are some individualized portions that have a will to seek to move further along towards the latter portions of the octave. And so essentially, as all of creation springs into life, all of the densities are inhabited by consciousness, by beings, because if everything was in first density, it would kind of be a stalemate. At least that's what it feels like, right? If everything just began as first density without space-time, without any awareness of self, it would be hard to have any sort of idea of what potential exists. So some beings, some portions of consciousness start out in second density, start out in third density, start out in fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and even eighth. 2814, Dawn asks, is there any reason for some portions being much more efficient in learning? I am Ra. Is there any reason for some to learn more quickly than others? Look, if you wish, to the function of the will, the, shall we say, attraction to the upward spiraling line of light. So, some portions of intelligent infinity are just attracted to the higher expressions of the upward spiraling light, and then they manifest that portion of our creation. So 2815, Dawn says, now, as the major galaxy is created, and I am assuming all of its densities, I am assuming all, there are 8 densities created when this major galaxy is created. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is basically correct. However, it is well to perceive that the 8th density functions also as the beginning density or first density in its latter stages of the next octave of densities. So what Ra is saying here is, I'm guessing maybe then when this octave begins, that we go through the 8th density, but not quite into the next density, or the next octave, But maybe Ra is saying that then it just keeps going forward, and a portion of eighth density does begin the next octave, even at the beginning of this octave. I don't know, something to ponder and consider. And maybe the next question will give us a little bit more in regards to that. Dawn asks, are you saying then that there are an infinite number of octaves of densities 1 through 8? I am Ra. We wish to establish that we are truly humble messengers of the law of one. We can speak to you of our experiences and our understandings and learn in limited ways. However, we cannot speak in firm knowledge of all of the creations. We know only that they are infinite. We assume an infinite number of octaves. However, it has been impressed upon us by our own teachers that there is a mystery-clad unity of creation in which all consciousness periodically coalesces and again begins. Thus, we can only say we assume an infinite progression, though we understand it to be cyclical in nature and, as we have said, clad in mystery. So, again, this whole session appears to be clad in mystery in a lot of the things that Dawn is trying to figure out, and Ra doesn't even have complete answers for. So, they assume that there is an infinite number of octaves. However, they have also been informed that at some point everything starts over. So, again, a mystery-clad apparent paradox. So, 2818, Dawn says, thank you. When this major galaxy is formed by the Logos, polarity then exists in a sense that we have electrical polarity, a gravitational effect that probably isn't polarity. I'll have to ask that question. We do have electrical polarity existing at that time, is this correct? I am Ra. I accept this as correct with the stipulation that what you term electrical be understood as not only the one Larson stipulated its meaning, but also in what you would call the metaphysical sense. Questioner, are you saying then that we not only have a polarity of electrical charge, but also a polarity in consciousness at that time? I am Ra. This is correct. All is potentially available from the beginning of your physical space-time. It then being the function of consciousness complexes to begin to use the physical materials to gain experience, to then polarize in a metaphysical sense. The potentials for this are not created by the experiencer, but by intelligent energy. This will be the last full question of this session due to our desire to foster this instrument as it slowly regains physical complex energy. May we ask if you have 1 or 2 questions we may answer shortly before we close? So here I believe, essentially, that what they're saying is that once intelligent infinity begins to differentiate itself into intelligent energy, into a physical expression of itself, that there is polarity. There is physical polarity and there is metaphysical polarity. And again, Ross says that in our previous octave, the metaphysical polarity we have, obviously, we consider it in a lot of ways to be service to self, service to others. That's one of the metaphysical polarities. But we also have the metaphysical polarity of the masculine and the feminine, which is the conscious and the subconscious. And that the apparent and relatively artificial separation of those two potentials. And Ra also refers to that, the masculine as the reacher, and the feminine as the one who awaits the reaching. And in the previous octave, Ross says that polarity was actually the mover and the moved. And we then, in this octave, have refined that concept. And essentially, the physical laws of potential experience that are created are the archetypal mind. And as Ra describes the archetypal mind, it is a lot about the masculine and the feminine and how those two things interplay with each other. But there is also polarity in the physical sense, in the electrical sense, and that is also part of what creates our physical experience. So 2820, Dawn says, I am assuming that the process of creation then, after the original creation of the major galaxy, is continued by the further individualization of consciousness of the Logos, so that there are many, many portions of individualized consciousness then creating further items, you might say, for experience all over the galaxy. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct, for within the, shall we say, guidelines or ways of the Logos, the sub-Logos may find various means of differentiating experiences without removing or adding to these ways. So again, the Logos creates the archetypal mind for its local, individualized experience, and then sub-Logoi have the potential to work within that framework without removing or adding to it, but just exploring the possibilities in their own individual and unique ways. So, final question 2821. Don says, thank you, and since we are out of time, I'll just ask if there's anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or help the contact. I am Ra. This instrument is well adjusted. You are conscientious. I am Ra. I leave you, my friends, in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth then, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai. So, final question. Don gets no notes from Ra. Ra says, you're doing great. Just keep going. Obviously, Carla is sick, and there's nothing they can really do about that. I was just having a conversation with somebody about illness in private messages. I'm sure a lot of people this winter season have experienced illness. It's been a pretty bad season for that. And one of the things is that Ross says is that once you activate this potential illness within you, I think they say this way later, you have to let it run its course. Like if you have a viral illness and then like Carla, you have the subsequent physical weakening that accompanies that, the lower vital energy, that's something that you can't really, the natural laws of our creation require you to sort of deal with that. It's really hard to just then use the powers of your consciousness to erase what has already manifested as illness. The powers of consciousness and healing are meant more to prevent these potentials from being activated. It's not as easy once the potentials have been activated to just erase the negative effects and negate those effects. You kind of just have to let them run the course. And I think of that, I think we want to think that it's easy to just mind over matter, that kind of thing. But I think of things like that's objectively untrue about, like if you break a bone, if you break your femur, that's not something you can just mind over matter, right? You actually have to rest and let that bone heal. You can't just get up and tell yourself that you're going to walk around on a broken limb and be okay. So with a lot of illness, you just kind of have to deal with the consequences since it's already manifested. The point of healing, like I said, is to refine the mind complex in a way that it is balanced enough to integrate in a useful way with your physical body so that you aren't manifesting these potentials for illness. But Carla took the LSD. She stayed up for like 24 hours, I think it was, or something like that. She stayed up way longer than she should have. And especially as somebody who knows that she has limited physical and vital energy, even when she did that, she felt so good, so she just let herself do that. And I mean, it's probably likely that since she took this drug that increased her vital energy, even if she had tried to sleep, she wouldn't have been able to sleep. But she probably could have done more introspective type activities instead of the very physically draining activities that she did do. And again, Ross says that was a negative being intensifying these desires within her that weren't helpful to her balancing her mind and her body in the ways that she knew and recognized that were limitations of her own physical body. So healing and health, very complicated. We're going to talk more about it as the sessions go on, and hopefully I can offer some insights. I don't know. I feel in general, I should probably knock on some wood when I say this out loud, but I have a pretty healthy body complex. And before I found the raw material, I did not. I had a fairly sickly and weak body complex. So I feel like somehow I've figured out something as far as maintaining a healed state of being, not activating the potentials for illness And so hopefully I can help transmit some of these concepts. And again, like I said, I know a lot of people have been sick lately. And I think part of it is a symptom of just the times we live in and the energies that are on our earth right now and how discordant and distorted they are and how much work it takes to step out of those thought forms and to reject the societal thought forms that are not serving the balance of your own mind and body complex. So anyway, if anyone has any questions about that in the short term, for me, as always, any questions, reach out, comment, email me. My easiest email to recite and have you reach out to me is jade.norby@gmail.com. Should be easy to reach out to me there. If you do want to send me an email, you can message me on Discord, message me here, comment here, message me on Substack. However you want to reach out to me, I will do my best to find that message and respond. As always, I appreciate all of you so much, and I appreciate the privilege of being able to spend my time recording this and editing this and publishing it and getting it out for everybody. I wish I had a little bit more time so I could move a little bit faster, but I am trying to accept what I do have and work within that realm and just surrender to whatever timeline is given to me. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep recording, going to keep editing, going to keep publishing, and I'm very grateful to our creator for allowing me to do this because it's a pretty fun way to spend my time. So I will see you all next time with session 29.